First up is a film called The Burial. It's out streaming now on Amazon Prime, and it's actually based on a true story. It centers around a court case called O'Keefe versus Lowen. Tommy Lee Jones stars as Jeremiah O'Keefe, and he is basically a funeral home franchise owner. He also has sort of an insurance company thing on the side, but he generally seems like a pretty nice guy. He lives in the South. They try to establish him as this sort of stand-up character, but he falls on a little bit of financial woes, and so he tries to sell part of his company to a character called Ray Lowen, played by Bill Camp, who Bill Camp is such a good actor. I mean, everyone in this is a pretty good actor, but I'm like, why would Bill Camp in this role? Anyway, so they are locked in a business, legal, etc. duel, and the court filing happens in a very small rural area that is predominantly Black people. And so both sides end up bringing in an army of Black lawyers in order to, appeal to the local jury and the judge, and et cetera, et cetera. Jamie Foxx plays Willie Gary, who is this big, flashy lawyer who, comes in guns a-blazing. Poor Mamadou Athie in this movie. He plays this young, just graduated, just passed the bar lawyer, who is the original one who goes to Tommy Lee Jones is like, hey, this race thing is going to be a problem if you go here, because Tommy Lee Jones's original, OG lawyer is played by Alan Ruck of Succession and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And then finally, you have Journey Smollett playing another lawyer for Bill Camp's side, so she's in opposition to Jamie Foxx and Mamadou Athie's characters. But basically what this all comes down to is a bunch of people of color, lawyers of color, defending two pretty well-off and privileged white men. And I know it's based on a true story, and I do love a good legal court thriller, but I just was like, I don't care what happens to you. I know that they try to establish the Tommy Lee Jones character as this altruistic guy. He's a war hero. He stands up for civil rights and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm like, he had money. He had privilege. He made a mistake. Another predatory white man, is taking advantage of that. There are other elements that get woven into it, and I don't want to go too much into those. But the thing for me is, because so much of it still at the center of it is about these two privileged characters, I personally was not like, oh, I feel so bad for them. And, they're using these Black characters to try and make us feel like, at least Tommy Lee Jones's character is like a good guy. And I don't know if it's like stand-in is the right word, but using him to help seek racial justice. But I'm like, well, it's not, because he's still the white guy who wins. Like, if this case had happened and the plaintiff had been a Black person or a different person of color, I don't think we'd have a movie about it. I mean, maybe we would, but I don't think the ruling would have gone the way the ruling went, is what I will say. Again, I'm getting bogged down in sort of the legalities of it, but the other thing I will say about this movie is, again, love a good law drama, but it's too long. And it's trying to bring all these other elements in and centering on the Black characters and like the way that parts of that community had been preyed on by some of these things. And it left a weird taste in my mouth, having it all come back to these two white male privileged characters at the end. So, I think, honestly, as a background watch, it's totally fine. I don't think this is going to be the most gripping thing you watch. I don't think it's bad, necessarily. I do wish it had been more concise. I think it could have been elevated if it was more concise, because you have these two Academy Award winners. You have this, like, legendary actor in Bill Camp. Mamadou Athie, I think, is actually such an underrated actor. Journey Smollett is, I love her in Birds of Prey. I know that's a weird one, but I think she brings something valuable to those. But everyone just sort of feels performative, and I know they're actors, so it is their job to perform, but I don't feel an emotional investment in this. I might not be the right audience for that. I do think if you come from, geographically that area, or culturally that area, or racially that area, you might feel more of the things it's trying to pull at, but I just worry that the lens of at least one of the protagonists is actually doing it a disservice. So overall, again, I'm not going to say like, oh, you don't watch this movie, it's so terrible, but I'm not like, oh, run out and watch this and, oh, it's going to be the next, it's awards bait and all that stuff. I'll give it a 3.6 out of 5. The other thing I want to mention this week is called Lessons in Chemistry, and it's a new show on Apple TV+, and this is an interesting one for me. So the first 2 episodes are out now, and I watched them, and I was like, I am definitely intrigued by this. It's based on a book, and it stars Brie Larson as a character called Elizabeth Zott, who is a scientist, but is being, prevented from actually being taken seriously by the patriarchal system, which is the type of story I can get very into. And then she ends up hosting a cooking show, which, cooking is chemistry. Cooking, baking, all that stuff, absolutely chemistry. It also stars Lewis Pullman, who up until watching the show, you might recognize him from something like Top Gun. I didn't realize he's Bill Pullman's son. Now that I see it, I can't unsee it. He's fine. She's fine. Aja Naomi King is in it. Stephanie Koenig, Patrick Walker. And I think the reason I stopped watching it, and I will actually caution you about it, is this is actually a similar situation to Pachinko, which was another Apple TV show that I ended up absolutely loving. But I started watching Pachinko and I was like, I need to read the book. Like, I don't think if I watch this show and go back to the book, it will be the right order to do this in. Now, if you're someone who just isn't particularly interested in books or just wants to go straight to the show, I think that's totally fine. But watching it, I did feel the sense of like, ooh, I bet you this is better structured as a book. And I haven't seen the whole season yet, but I will be pausing and waiting and reading the book first and then going back. But it's an intriguing enough subject. You know, I think Brie Larson, also an Academy Award winner, is a great actress. She's playing this sort of cold, clinical character in this, which is totally fine. You know, I kind of wish we didn't always portray like female scientists as so with sort of one-dimensional. I was like, no emotions, just science. Women in STEM can be three-dimensional creatures. But, you know, I think she's like a slightly overdoing it a little in the beginning, but it starts to warm. Louis Pullman is fine. The other character's fine. But this is one where I'm going to say, take a pause. If you want to read the book first, read the book first. If not, I think it's interesting enough, you know, go right ahead. But to my fellow bibliophiles, book first, then series.